Today from the global lane, Ransom unpaid. This kidnapped Nigerian Christian refuses to renounce her faith. It may cost Leah her life. Promise kept. NAFTA is dead and a new trade deal with Mexico and Canada is ready for approval. What it means for Americans. Tensions in minority communities against the police. How to overcome injustice and disrespect. And leftists gone wild. What should be done to expose their big money backers and prevent more violence? And it's all right here, right now from the global lane. Time is running out for Leah Sharibu. She's the Nigerian Christian schoolgirl kidnapped by Boko Haram-affiliated terrorists last February. The 15-year-old has refused to convert to Islam, and the Nigerian government paid a ransom for the Muslim schoolgirls who were kidnapped with her. But not for Leah. She's standing firm in her faith. It may cost her her life. In mid-September, her kidnappers said if a ransom goes unpaid, they will kill Leah within 30 days. Well, here with an update from The Hague, Netherlands, is international human rights attorney Emmanuel Ogebe. So, Emmanuel, first tell us, what is the latest on Leah? I understand her parents made an impassioned plea for Nigerian President Buhari to get involved.
Yes, Gary, that is correct. As you mentioned a couple of weeks ago, the terrorists released a video they called The Message of Blood, where they actually shot an international aid worker who was also a hostage. And they killed a nurse from the Red Cross. And they announced that they would kill Leah as well within a month if the government didn't respond to them. So a few days ago, I had the opportunity to meet Leah's mother again, and she made an impassioned plea to the government and to the world to help get Leah back.
Emmanuel, has there been any response from the government up to this point?
Up to this point, the government hasn't so much as contacted the family of Leah. They have not spoken to her father or her mother since the day that Leah was abducted 7 months ago. So all we hear from the government is from, the media that they're doing the best they can. But the terrorists have said that the Nigerian government has not contacted them. And I have been reached by people close to the terrorists, and they are saying that we should ask the government to do what they asked them to do.
Emmanuel, does this have anything to do with the fact that she's a Christian? I mean, after all, they paid a ransom to release the Muslim schoolgirls, but not Leah. So how does that play into this?
Well, sadly, under the Sharia law, the testimony of a Christian in a court is less than the testimony of a Muslim.
So what do you expect is going to happen now, then?
Well, from what I hear, the terrorists have asked for a high ransom because they see the world paying attention to this 15-year-old. We don't know whether for political reasons, with the upcoming elections, that the government will decide to pay a ransom for her. It's unclear.
What can our viewers do, especially for Leah, the teen girl threatened with death for her faith?
Yes, well, Leah called out to us in the Proof of Life video, and she said we should support her family. And I think that that's what we need to do, support her family, call our congressmen in the U.S. and call the United Nations and say they need to intervene to save the life of this 15-year-old heroic Christian girl.
Okay, Emmanuel Ogebe, international human rights attorney from The Hague. Thanks for the update.
Thanks, Gary.
God Almighty is a God of blessing. He always wants to bless his people. But how do you get that blessing? And what principles will unlock that secret?
In Miraculous Blessings, Pat Robertson shows you how to open the floodgates of God's awesome blessings in your life.
In order to have a blessing, you've got to be blessable.
Discover what the Bible has to say about God's covenant of blessing, the laws of blessing, and what are the hindrances to the blessings of God.
The words of Jesus, they are as valid as the law of gravity, and if we follow those laws, we will be blessed.
You'll see amazing true stories of everyday people whose lives were rescued and transformed by God's miraculous blessings.
But even the doctors acknowledged that this had to be a miracle.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit CBN.com to become a CBN partner and get miraculous blessings today.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. My husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphans Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
During the 2016 presidential campaign, Donald Trump pledged that if elected, he would do away with NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. He said it was a bad deal, an agreement that unfairly benefited Mexico and Canada. And as promised, President Trump has renegotiated NAFTA, and he says the deal was reached because of his threatened tariffs. He says it's good for all workers in all 3 countries, but he has his doubts about gaining congressional approval.
It's the single greatest agreement ever signed. They'll say, well, you know, Trump likes it, therefore we're not going to approve it, because that would be good for the Republicans.
Well, joining us with more is former Commerce Department Director Chris Garcia. Chris, what do you think? Why should Democrats and all Americans get behind this new deal with Canada and Mexico?
Well, because all you've got to do, Gary, is take a look at the facts. This is a great deal, and everybody wins. There's something in this for everyone. You've got auto workers that win because more manufacturing of autos and automobile parts are going to be made in North America, in the United States. Previously under NAFTA, it was 62.5% that was required to be made in the United States. That has increased to 75%. You also have high-wage labor. 30% of all automobile parts and automobiles together have to be made with $16 an hour labor or more. You have environmental protections. You have better standards for e-commerce, more IP protection. You've got more ability for workers to organize and unionize, especially for those in Mexico. So it's really hard for anybody, Republican or Democrat, to not be in favor of this deal. It's a huge win.
And especially also for farmers, right, because of the dairy tariffs from Canada. So let's break it down, Chris. What will it mean for the average American? Not just the workers in manufacturing or the farmers, but just each and every one of us.
Sure. So we have more cooperation now with our allies north and south of the border. So what does that mean? That means more free market, more free trade. This is more reciprocal trade. Again, the president wanted to have 0 tariffs, 0 non-tariff barriers, and 0 subsidies. And ultimately what that does is it actually increases the quality of products when you have more choice, and it drives down the price of those consumer products. And so that's good for everybody. Everyday Americans can be happy, not just with this deal, but because of the entire strategy President Trump is taking. By getting this deal done with our allies north and south of the border, we can now do an about-face to China and focus on China's real outright IP theft, their forced technology transfers. And this is really a systematic reorientation of the supply chain from China back to North America, and that will be good for all everyday Americans.
I want to talk to you more about China and the EU and the effect on that in a moment. But remember 25 years ago, many Americans were led to believe that NAFTA was good for our country, but the president said it was a bad deal. So what was so bad about it before?
Yeah, so basically this North American Free Trade Agreement that was struck, negotiated by President Clinton, signed into law by President Bush, this was done before the age of the internet. This was done in a way to cooperate with our allies north and south of the border, Canada and Mexico. And so what that does is that it does open up cheaper labor. It opens up a different supply chain. It allows us to be more competitive. But what that does is it ships jobs overseas by allowing cheaper labor companies to produce products at a lower cost. So it's good for consumers, But the problem is at what cost? If you don't have a job, if your community has been hollowed out, and all these jobs have shipped overseas, a lot of people can't provide for their families anymore, frankly. So that's what was so bad about NAFTA and why it needed to be updated, modernized, and in President Trump's opinion, and as he's shown as being successful, is the entire scrapping of it and issuing and signing a new deal. And this is why we need congressional support for it.
Chris, I'm from Michigan, and I saw it all too well, even though I haven't lived there for a while, when I'd go back and visit. Factories shut down, jobs sent to Mexico and overseas. So no wonder the president won the vote in Michigan and other of those Rust Belt states. Now, after this deal was announced, the stock market soared to a new record high. So how might the deal help reach other agreements, let's say with the EU and, as you mentioned earlier, with China?
Yeah, so this is very positive news. The markets have reacted very, very positively. The European Union and Japan have already, spoken with the United States, and they've said that we are going to be very supportive of you. We'll back you in your approach to tackling China's IP theft, their forced technology transfer. And it's important to understand that China really has been a bad actor ever since we let them into to the WTO in 2001. They have cheated, they've lied, they've ripped us off, they've manipulated their currencies, they've dumped their steel and aluminum prices by subsidizing it from the government, making American steel and aluminum producers not as competitive. And that puts American workers out of work. So this is a real systematic problem. China has been ripping off the global world trade order in just the last 2 decades. And so now we have the upper hand. The economy is prospering because of President Trump's pro-growth policies. We now have our allies north and south of the border on our side, and we've got the European Union backing us, we've got Japan backing us, we've got Korea backing us. So now China is going to be in a very difficult position if they have all of these allies asking them and frankly demanding that they cut out these practices, cut out the cheating. We're in a very strong position to make them come back to the table and make some concessions. Okay, good things ahead. Chris Garcia, International Business and Economics Analyst, former Commerce Department Director. Thanks for your insights. Great to see you, Gary.
Parents, the Superbook Bible app is a great way to get your child reading the Bible because in today's busy world, we can use some help. The free Superbook Bible app has fun stuff your kids will love. They'll have a blast learning the Bible, playing great games, watching cool videos, discovering heroes in the Bible. They'll have fun while they learn God's Word. The Superbook Kids Bible app, available now.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
We had 4 jobs that didn't go right, but we didn't waver in our faith.
That's when God put on my heart that we needed to do the well.
Within a couple of days, we got an insurance refund check that we had no idea was coming.
And here we are, this year, it's just boom.
You go out and help other people and you get rewarded for it.
Get Pat Robertson's latest teaching, Miraculous Blessings.
Several years ago, it was the Black Lives Matter movement. More recently, the NFL Take a Knee. African Americans and others are speaking out against police brutality and injustice. What effect have these leftist movements had on American society? Have they helped improve race relations or made them worse? How will all this play out in the upcoming midterm election? Well, Ken Blackwell of the Family Research Council joins us with more now. Ken, you've written about Michael Brown and his fatal shooting by Ferguson police, also the Black Lives Matter movement. So more than 4 years later, does this movement have any relevancy? Where has it gone? Has it been based on untruths?
Well, look, one of the foremost important things in city life and community life is safety. The men and women who are on our police forces are at the point of where neighbors and citizens find themselves in danger. In many instances, there have to be decisions made that are life and death decisions, and 99% of the time, police officers get it right. 1% of the time, they might get it wrong. And we have systems and processes in place to take a look at those and to make sure that mistakes are called out, and where there has been brutality, it is in fact addressed. Policing is of utmost importance. It is not the time to unfairly rabble-rouse and create anxiety. And that's what some of these leftist-leaning groups, Antifa, Black Lives Matters, they're for disruption, they're for division and subtraction, not multiplication and addition, which is such needed in human relations in our communities.
Ken, do they have a legitimate complaint, though? Don't people of color face more mistreatment and injustice from police and the legal system than white Americans?
Look, the fact of the matter is that there's a disproportionate percentage of blacks and Latinos and people of color who have interactions with police departments. In terms of raw numbers, that is not true. But in terms of percentages, that shouldn't surprise anyone. What should disturb people in the way that we look at this is if, in fact, first, this in acts of brutality or bad judgment that's swept under the rug and sidestepped, or if in fact you take split-second decisions, life or death decisions, where folks did things by procedure and there was an unfortunate death caused by that action, you can't condemn folks for doing their jobs and protecting folks. And so as it relates to making sure that justice is done, we have to make sure that there is sufficient oversight, that we're using all technology so that we actually can make a judgment call after the fact. In many of these instances, split-second decisions have to be made by human beings who are trained, but human beings nonetheless, that are in fact life-death decisions.
Back to the movements themselves, Black Lives Matter, NFL Take a Knee movement, how have they affected minority attitudes against the police?
Well, I think what they have done is that they have exacerbated bad relations between the community. It's not as if local elected officials, civic groups don't take action when action is needed. Many times these outside groups come in just to create division and strife and disrupt civic life in communities that don't need disruption. There are many ways that leading public figures that happen to play football or baseball who see an injustice, for them to speak out. I don't think that it is appropriate or the most effective way for those folks to take a demonstrative act against our flag, our pledge of allegiance, the pledge to the flag, the national anthem. These things are in place to engender a cohesive, cooperative action as a nation. And these things speak to our common bond. It flies in the face of common sense for these acts to be played out in these arenas in the name of seeking justice. It just causes strife and indifference.
Ken, I think you, like me and most Americans, have seen shows like Cops and now Live PD. And one thing that strikes me with these shows is there seems to be a lack of respect for the authority of the police. Now, I know there's an importance having a strong male role model in a child's life. 66% of African American kids live in single family households, many of them without a father present. So how does having a father figure in a family affect a child's ability to respect authority, learn respect and discipline and obedience?
Most acts of crime committed by black perpetrators are against black people. That's one thing to keep in mind. Two, cities don't have enough money to put a police officer on every corner. And so there are two things that have to be in play. One, individual responsibility, and two, respect for authority. When you don't have respect for authority, when you have no sense of individual responsibility, you leave yourself open, and communities leave themselves open to this sort of racial strife and this sort of acting out against authority or those who are in authority.
So how do we make progress here, Ken? How can the police be more sensitive, but at the same time gain more respect in minority communities?
Well, one of the things that I know from being a mayor of a city council member, a community leader, a father, and a churchgoer, what we need is more community-based policing. And because familiarity actually breeds respect. That is all about relationships.
Finally, I've got to ask you how you expect these attitudes to play out in the upcoming midterm election. After all, President Trump always talks about how his policies have led to record low unemployment rates for American minorities. So how's this going to play out?
Well, I can tell you, as a mayor, I was always concerned about, first and foremost, about safe neighborhoods. The fact of the matter is that I don't care what community you go in, people are concerned about their safety and the safety of their children. And so we make a mistake if we think that the disrespect for police officers is a blanket disrespect in the African American community. Many police officers in these communities are Hispanic and African American people of color. And as a consequence of that, I don't think that those who are trying to blow the winds of disrespect and rancor are going to carry the day. I actually think the president and those folks who are for law and order, for economic growth and job creation, for work and the dignity that comes from work will carry the day.
Okay, we'll see how it all plays out. Ken Blackwell, Senior Fellow for Human Rights and Constitutional Governance at the FRC. Thank you for joining us, Ken.
Good to be with you, sir.
When you give, smiles grow bigger. When you care, homes are happier. When you comfort, the hurt goes away. When we all come together to love, miracles happen.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. My husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphans Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
Hello? Is this thing on? Hey, kids, do you love games? And do you love discovering things? Well, do ya?
Then you're gonna love this. It's the new free Superbook Kids Bible app. You can play games, watch videos, find answers to your questions, and a whole lot more. The new Superbook Kids Bible app. Free downloads available on iTunes and Google Play now.
The American left is getting dangerously out of control. Watch as some pro-cannabis activists recently tried to force their way into the office of Maryland Congressman Andy Harris.
Can we talk to you?
Excuse me. Andy. I'm here to speak to you.
Wow.
Why is he so close?
Now watch these women from the Center for Popular Democracy. It's a group funded by leftist billionaire George Soros. They made a pre-planned confrontation with Senator Jeff Flake. It happened at a Senate elevator just before Flake demanded an FBI investigation as part of a deal to send the Brett Kavanaugh Supreme Court confirmation to the full Senate.
Look at me when I'm talking to you. You're telling me that my assault doesn't matter.
So what are these leftists really after? The D.C.'s Stephanie Hamill recently talked with Antifa protesters at a rally in Washington. Listen to this.
5, 6, 7, 8. America was never great.
I think we need something new, something different. If that's socialism, it is. If it's anarchism, it's something.
Like, I make barely $9 an hour, and I can't support myself on that. I live with my parents.
Let's see. You make only $9 an hour, and you live with your parents. Maybe you should spend less time going to protests. How about getting a second job, or even going to school to get a better education? Too many young adults are looking to their parents or the government to take care of them. Whatever happened to a little ingenuity and hard work? Leftists are really getting out of hand. Sometimes their anger spills over into violence. Remember the smashing of windows in Washington, D.C. during Trump's inaugural? And now some members of Congress are receiving death threats because of their political views. How can we forget the congressional baseball shooting? Just ask Congressman Steve Scalise about that one. These are not just random acts. Often what appears to be a spontaneous act of protest is actually a well-thought-out act of defiance, funded by left-wing, anti-capitalist, anti-American groups. Now, I'm not calling for a return to McCarthyism, but maybe we need a congressional or Justice Department investigation into who is actually funding and organizing some of these protests and movements. Let's lift the veil. Americans deserve full disclosure. And while you're at it, maybe we should also investigate the backgrounds of some members of Congress. Maybe we should dig back 30, 40 years into their past, give them a show trial just like they did with Brett Kavanaugh. That may be the only way to truly drain the swamp. Well, that's it from the Global Lane this week. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, and Twitter. And now on our 24-hour CBN News channel on Broadcast TV. And until next time, be blessed.